The Isle of Man is renowned for its natural beauty, its vast, picturesque beaches, fair seas, and majestic, rolling countryside. And it has the largest working water wheel in the world. But there is something unexpected that can be found in the Manx countryside. Wallabies. After escaping the wildlife park in the late 1960s, the wallabies have established themselves in the Manx countryside. Feeding on grasses, ivy, and the bark of trees, the population has increased to well over 100 individuals. But are there hidden problems that these cute creatures may create?
We haven't monitored the wallabies as closely as some people think they should be monitored. I think so when they escaped in the 60s, of course, there was a handful, like one or two. I think for the last few years, I think that their numbers have increased quite drastically. So, whereas maybe 50 years ago, it was weird to see one, now you practically fall over them, they're everywhere, and they don't even move away because they're so habituated to people.
Initially, so I'd say probably 10 plus years ago, they were quite useful in helping to keep down the vegetation in areas where we're not allowing the curragh to enclose completely, so we want to have a mosaic of open grassland and curragh, and they were quite useful in helping to keep that, because obviously we don't cut those for hay. We tend to find that wherever we cut down the willow, whereas normally we'd be looking to have that regenerate, the wallabies just constantly eat the regrowth, so they don't regrow anymore.
Well, the wallabies is very much a contentious issue. I think there's both an emotional and a rational view that you can take of it. Emotionally, they're lovely looking, doe-eyed, cuddly creatures, but from a nature conservation point of view, they're just simply in the wrong place. They've been translocated 12,000 miles across hemispheres to be here. They don't belong here, and there is evidence growing that they are doing damage to the natural environment. It's difficult to talk in evidenced terms because there hasn't been an awful lot of research here. There's certainly evidence from elsewhere in the world where they're equally deemed to be a nuisance, and the evidence shows that they can have an effect on plant life. We know here they're having an effect on other animals as well, but it's very much about the intrusive nature of wallabies as a big mammal, but also their grazing habitats. Those are the two areas where there seem to be significant problems.
They tend to be eating the willow, including willow bark, and ivy during the winter months, where obviously there's a lot less vegetation, more palatable perhaps. The problem with the wallabies is that although we have grazing on our reserves, it's controlled. So we know exactly how many sheep are on for what period, we can time when they go on, when they come off and things like that. The thing about the wallabies is they can come at any time. And they do seem to have preferences. So like one year there'll be a certain part of the site where they seem to be particularly active, and then the following year or subsequent years they've moved on to somewhere else.
Here in the Isle of Man there's not a lot of evidence because we haven't done a great deal of research, and I do have a particular view that if there is research money available, why should we be spending it on an alien animal when actually it's a point of principle, it's a point of precaution that we shouldn't have them here, and research money should be spent on conservation priorities.
We need to build our case mainly because there's no political will to investigate it. But then, again, that's our job to gather enough evidence to build up an impetus so that we can start to do some proper monitoring to, gather that information together.
I think I am yet to be persuaded that they do have a long-term place here. Historically, the island has not had any megafauna, as we might call it, in terms of grazers, and the island's done pretty well without it. There's an ecosystem that has developed without them, so why should we now spend time and money trying to manage them rather than getting back to the basics of looking after the native wildlife that's here?
It's very difficult because the island doesn't have any charismatic megafauna, although they're contentious animals, things like, we don't have deer, we don't have badgers, we don't have foxes. For the first time that you see one, it is kind of like a shock to the system. I mean, I find now that, there's a wallaby. Say 10, 20 years ago, it was a case of, goodness, I saw a wallaby today. Now it's a case, I didn't see one today, I wonder where they all are.
It's my responsibility and others in my profession to be better at communicating and to give people that are promoting the Isle of Man as a destination the tools to be able to market other things other than a quick fix of a wallaby.
I can see they are the sort of creatures that are novel, and the chance to come and see them lurking around the woodlands here is potentially an attraction. But I also take the view that what the island should be selling is its natural fauna, flora, its natural landscape.
Well, I would anticipate that from normal animal populations they're going to reach a peak, at which point they then start to fall off. I mean, I already come across quite a lot of ones that have died. Any that you get really close to, you'll find that they're blind. So there's obviously something within the genetics of them now.
I think the real issue is that we're sitting here in the Curraghs in the Isle of Man, which is a particularly special habitat. It has a long history, and it was once a very rich, biodiverse site, and we've lost a lot of that diversity, and the wallabies are implicated in some of that loss. And the Curraghs needs a management plan. The island is a whole nation biosphere. We are indeed the world's first whole island, whole nation biosphere, and we need to look after our natural environment much better than we do.